everybody. Welcome to the first Ubuntu desktop team Indaba of the year 2023. We're joined with by Andrew Doby, Stu Karoff, and Aaron to talk about Ubuntu used in primary education. Since Aaron just came from that world, do you want to introduce our guests a little bit more in detail?
I'd be happy to. So we have with us two amazing educators here. First, I'll start with Mr. Andrew Doby, who is a regional science and technology educator at Centennial Senior School with the Peel School District Board in Brampton, Ontario, Canada. And Mr. Stu Karoff, who's a technology integrationist at Aspen Academy in Savage, Minnesota. So thank you both for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'll kick us off with a very simple question that you probably saw coming is, how did you get started using Linux in your classrooms? I'll start with Stu.
Started using Linux in my classroom. Guess it must have been about 2010. I was working at a charter school in North Minneapolis, and the school handed me a couple of desktop computers running Windows for use for like educational platform stuff, but only had two for my room. And I was expected to just rotate kids through there. And I thought, I'm dabbling with Linux at home, and I have some friends who have given me cast-off machines. So if I bring in a few of those, then I can turn that 2 into 4 or 5, and then actually have reasonable groups rotating in my room. So that's what I did. And I was delighted to see that the kids really took to it. And from there, started using it more and more in the next few schools that I went to.
Awesome. How about you, Andrew?
Similar start. A little bit later, we started looking at computers and getting them into the classrooms around 2015, because that's when we started noticing a whole bunch of skids of old desktops being loaded and taken out of schools. We were wondering where they were going and why they were being taken out when we only really had one teacher desktop computer per classroom. Students really didn't have anything. So why did we start using Linux in particular? Because it's what would run on the older computers when nothing else would run. And we could make it functional so every kid could have access to something in the classrooms.
Yeah. And then as a follow-up, at my next school in like 2011, 2012, I just started working at that school when they were launching a one-to-one laptop program in the middle school. And it was these small Windows-based PCs that immediately kids started breaking and losing and forgetting to charge and leaving at home and stuff like that. And so technically we're supposed to have, every kid's supposed to have a device, and yet I have 20 to 30% of every class where the kid doesn't have a device. So I went to a local nonprofit to get a hardware grant and set up a bank of Linux desktops along one side of my wall or one side of my room. And it just grew from there. So that, and again, the kids just took right to it.
That's great. I wanted to ask a quick follow-up question. Like you said, it grew. So do you have like what's your storage like now?
Well, you want to take that one, Andrew, or?
Well, as far as our growth was concerned, we started in one classroom. The one classroom, we had a similar idea where we could reach out to a charity who would give us a donated amount of computers. And I thought, okay, maybe they'll give us 10. So I called them and spoke to them on the phone, and I said, is 10 okay? And she said, sure. Well, how many do you need? I said, well, how about 100? And then immediately she said, sure, we can do that. So they gave us 100 free computers, and we ended up spreading them throughout our whole school. Right at the peak, we had about 250 donated Linux computers running in our one building. And then within a few years, we had spread through 40 different schools.
Whoa, love that. With us, we're a charter school, so we're kind of a district unto ourselves. And once I had these Linux desktops in my room, I had a group of kids that would just come and loiter every afternoon waiting for the after school program to start. And contractually, I couldn't leave the building until 4:30, and they wouldn't leave my room until 4:30. And I thought, okay, if I'm stuck with you guys for 20 minutes, then you guys are going to learn how these things actually work. And then from there, we founded a Linux club. And so we were, at the time, I know we were like the only Linux club in the world that was in a Hmong charter school, but it was one of the few middle school Linux clubs anywhere in North America. And the club just sort of took off from there. Eventually, over the course of 8 years, we had over 200 kids go through the club at various points. And we'd started donating computers to families where they needed one in their home because they didn't have any. And when I left, we had just handed out, like, we gotten up to about 290 during that time period. So that was, making a point of trying to get the kids involved.
Absolutely.
So, Stu, you said in total you gave out almost 300 laptops to families in need.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's a similar background that Andrew has as well in his donation program.
Yeah, we're still going big time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an idea of how many that you've been able to donate, Andrew, so far?
Easily thousands. And it's the numbers are going up daily because we're still supporting local charities too, who are helping new immigrant families as they come into Canada. And as soon as we have computers ready, we bring the families in and we're running education programs with them to help them understand how to use the computers, because there's a small learning curve overall, though they're pretty similar to Chromebooks. So we try and help many people, as many as we can. And that's just the charities. Within my own school, probably 20, 30 students this year so far have come to see me about, is there any way we can get a computer for at-home use? And we just dig through any resources we have, we build them, and we send them home for them to use it, so they always have something available.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Now, I know I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask another question, but if you have a follow-on, go ahead.
Well, at my current school, I came in 2019. So that was right before the whole thing started with COVID. And we, right in the door, I decided, well, we have an after school program here. Let's start a Linux club and see what happens. And it was a pretty modest start. We started off with 14 kids and they were having fun, and we started recycling some computers so we could give them away. But in 4 or 5, I guess maybe 5 months, we'd only given away like maybe 6 computers. So I thought, okay, I guess we don't really have that much of a need here. And then the school was closed down for distance learning due to COVID. And our school didn't really have a supply of devices that we could readily hand out. So they came to the club and me and said, do you have any ideas? And I was like, yes, I do. We will appeal over social media, YouTube, local media, in the news. We'll solicit donations. The kids and I are going to refurbish them with Linux, and as long as they're available. And then once they can't come into the building anymore, I'll take care of it myself, and we'll hand them out as they come in. And in 7 weeks, we ended up handing out 60, which was 10 times what we had done prior to that. When we came back in the fall, the school was converted to hybrid learning and synchronous classes. So every kid needed a device, and the need shot way up. And eventually we ended up handing out like 350. It was something like that. It was just crazy. But yeah, it's like 100% of the computers we handed out for distance learning were Linux ones. Now the distance learning is no longer a thing. A lot of those computers are now being used in classrooms around the building.
Perfect.
That's so great that you're able to provide hardware with a usable operating system, to these families and kids in need. I guess I have 2 questions, kind of like what age of kids are we talking about here? And then I think back to when I was in fifth, sixth, seventh grade, you know, a budding teenager, if I had been exposed to Linux, it would have been a game changer. Well, I don't think Linux was around quite yet because I'm kind of old, but like that's amazing. So I'm curious, have you seen the kids go kind of above and beyond and say like, oh, what can we do with this Linux, and kind of push those limits and get really excited? Do you see that infectious, you know, excitement?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Want me to respond first?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Andrew, go ahead.
So as far as age ranges of the kids that we service or support, all the way down to grade, I don't know how the grade system works in the States, but 7, 8-year-olds. So kindergarten or pre-kindergarten.
It's like second grade.
Yeah, 7 and 8 would be like second grade here.
Yeah.
Okay, so usually at younger ages, they're comfortable using the Linux operating systems, no problem, because we can still run the current stable version of Chrome on all of the devices. So they're fairly familiar with using any of the G Suite tools. As far as kids going above and beyond, similar to what Stu does, we have our own student tech steward program in our school. Because of all the computers we have running, there's often a lot of breakdowns throughout the day, and kids will come to the class, or they'll just put them aside in their room. And once a week, our student tech stewards will coordinate their own movement, which is an interesting leadership opportunity for those kids. They've been trained in how to repair the computers. They coordinate their movements, go to the rooms, politely communicate with the teachers as far as what needs to be done, identify the problems, and then they bring the tools that they need to solve them. So we have a student tech team who are responsible for servicing and refurbishing all of the tech. And they help identify computers that are unfortunately obsolete, and we only recycle what we have to. We salvage everything that we can.
Very cool.
That's great.
And I know with us, as far as kids who are in the Penguin Corps or our Linux club, that goes from 5th through 8th grade. So we're actually, we're starting kids trying to learn the basics of using open source, but also trying to install it and configure it, as low as 5th grade. But as far as kids simply using it in class, I guess here I was in charge of trying to figure out what devices were going to go where. So for the smaller sets of computers that we use in the classrooms, the Linux ones start off in grade 1 and they go all the way up through grade 5. And then we have classroom sets from a few teachers in the middle school that use Linux. So really the only ones that are not using like actual like Ubuntu Linux computers regularly would be kindergarten. And they were using them in my computer lab this week. So they've been introduced to it too.
That's so great. So really like all age of kids, like, yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, Aaron created something that made it easy for us as far as deploying our Linux computers, in that he coached me through how to install ephemeral code and how to take the image and make it scrub itself. So the computers clean themselves every time the kids use them. So it's a kiosk kind of distro. It's really slick, and the kids understand how it works. So they know that if they just close Chrome, they're already signed out. And as far as that personal safety is concerned, it's huge. So little things like that have made a major impact. I don't know if I'm segueing into a future question, but thanks for that, Aaron. It's still being used today.
Aaron, we're gonna talk, because I'd really like to learn more about that. Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron, like here's your chance to kind of tell us a little bit more about this effort that you had before you joined Canonical.
Yes, I was an IT director at a school district, actually 2 school districts for the past 10 years. And we were full Linux at the one district for a number of years. And we built a specialized Xubuntu or Ubuntu spin that had some, like he said, ephemeral code and kiosk abilities that made it easy to deploy and manage from the administrative perspective. And our students were able to Stu and Andrew had. We had a student help desk that were in charge of handling those level 1 tasks. So students received some good like Linux technology skills. And I actually met Andrew through Twitter in a random exchange talking about exchanging tips on how you could easily deploy Linux in an education environment. So fast forward, and now I'm here. So
Yeah.
So my question for both of you guys then would be, do you allow your students to install different packages on your machines? And do you happen to give them full sudo access? What kind of limitations do you have on your kiddos?
It depends on who they are and how involved they are. When we first started, everything was locked because at that time, we didn't have a tech steward program. But as of now, when we give computers to families to use at home, everything's unlocked. They have full sudo access. In our school system, we have the tech stewards who have sudo access, so they can install code. They can install their own not just the operating system, but they also install apps as needed too. They help me with that, so I instruct them on how to once they have root access, what to do with it. And how to do their updates, upgrades, as far as installing Kden Live or OBS or Krita, we do that too. So yeah, root access. Honestly, I've been giving some of the older kids more access, and I've been challenging them if they don't have root access, can you break through? Because I want to see if they're actually able to try and gain access or break through the system, and then we can just make it even safer. Kind of like the way Linux works.
Kids make excellent testers. Absolutely.
That's so true.
It's the best QA team you could ask for.
We've been pretty casual about the access thing with our kids because we've kind of taken the attitude of if one of our kids really seriously screws up one of the computers to the point where it's not working correctly anymore, we can always just grab a flash drive and start it over, and that becomes a learning experience too. So I'm not sure how wise or cautious that is, but it's kind of worked for us here. So
I mean, that's kind of how we all started with Linux, right? We didn't limit our own accesses, and we shot ourselves in the foot repeatedly, and then we learned from it. So
yes.
Yeah. So I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Have you guys seen any pushback from like the administration on this budding new enterprise?
Yes.
Really?
How much do you want me to elaborate? Yes, there's always pushback, unfortunately.
I would have assumed that it would have been welcome, like all of these free computers that are usable.
But part of the problem is that we're taking those old computers that are supposed to be recycled, and we're keeping them in use. By keeping them in use, the schools aren't buying as many new, which threatens new purchase agreements in school boards. So there's a lot of pressure politically from that spending end of it. Not necessarily the teaching, like the teaching section within our school boards. They predominantly appreciate the work we're doing because, again, we're helping kids, supporting their learning. It's the spending political aspects that are causing more rifts within our work and roadblocks. So finding workarounds that's what we do on a daily basis.
And with us, I guess the pushback's been somewhat limited because I'm not having to deal with the level of bureaucracy that I would have to see working for district. We're a charter school, which means we're a district unto ourselves. And so we have a board, we have administration, but our administration has largely been very supportive of what we've done simply because they, at first at least, they didn't really understand it enough to question it much. And then when it proved to be both needed and useful, they really appreciated that we were saving so much money. Now, every once in a while, we've been kind of told, okay, well, we want to do X, Y, or Z with the Chromebooks, and the Linux thing you're doing here might be fine in these isolated spots. And then turns out the isolated spots just weren't big enough. So we ended up doing more with Linux anyway, and nobody complained. So it might be very different if we were part of the Minneapolis or Anoka Hennepin district or one of the large districts around here, where I'd have to deal with various levels of bureaucracy. Being small and independent has kind of worked in our favor. If anything, the pushback comes from when I've tried to go and talk to administrators from other schools and say, you really ought to do this. And there seems to kind of come down to two things. There's resistance to it because they know what they like and they like what they know. And since they hadn't heard of this, then they lose interest.
Which doesn't make sense because Linux platforms are essentially the root of all the other platforms. Everything's built on this system or Unix system. So why wouldn't people be comfortable with it? Because we're still using Chromebook-esque tools within or on top of a Linux platform. It baffles me.
You're not wrong, Andrew. You're not wrong. But when they're used to hearing the names like Google or Microsoft or Apple, those are the things that they're going to look for. Another thing, when I've suggested to other schools, you really should have a Linux club because they're impressed with what we've done here. The pushback seems to be, oh, we could never do that. That's big and we don't know how, and it's technical and it's scary, and we don't have anybody on staff who knows what you're doing. So, but as far as within our own building, we've been able to get away with quite a lot, you know.
Some of the biggest pushback that we're getting is Linux is not safe. And it's been kind of a weird position to put me in because people will say Linux is not safe, and yet there's absolutely no proof or support to any type of argument that they're presenting. Or
yeah, that makes no sense.
No, or computers can't be unenrolled because we can't reuse computers because they're not safe. I'm still trying to figure out where the argument is when our goal is to try and help students learn. I'm not saying computers help students learn. I'm saying computers support student learning. So why take them out of service when they still work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's also the environmentally friendly option as well, right? I think just generally in our culture, there should be more emphasis on like reusability. I mean, fixing our own things, but
well, and there's also just the dollar argument where it's like, if you're reusing a computer that you've already paid for, then you're not spending your money to buy a new one. If you're using open source to teach your students rather than paying for proprietary software, you're saving money there too on licensing fees. I mean, the argument that I've made to teachers is every dollar we save on tech is a dollar that could go toward your next raise.
Mm-hmm.
Or just more students with the programming.
Yes.
Rather than just with hardware purchase. Like absolutely.
More playground equipment, more books, more, you know, lab stuff for the chemistry teacher, you know, that kind of stuff.
More support teachers, funding more salaries for more people to provide one-on-one support with kids. You got it.
Yes. All of that. Yeah.
There's no downside.
So as a whole, how do you guys feel that the open source philosophy aligns with your teaching pedagogy? Andrew, I'll let you go first.
But the root of what I've researched as far as Linux is concerned is that we succeed when we all succeed, not just as an individual, but as a unit, as a species. And I'm trying to take that into an even bigger picture because as a living organism, all living organisms on the planet will benefit from the work that we're doing. We're trying to use appropriate infrastructure so that we don't waste material. We're trying to reinforce quality education for all. And at the same time, we're only recycling when we absolutely have to. So all of these tenets are perfectly aligned to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is the foundation of all of the pedagogical work that I've been doing for the last decade. And I'm going to continue to do it even past retirement, which hopefully isn't coming soon. But the point is that the United Nations have come up with Sustainable Development Goals, which is what every single teacher should be using as the foundation of the work that they're doing with their students. And Linux is essentially a partner with anything that is tied to the Sustainable Development Goals. It fits so perfectly that everybody should be doing this.
I agree with all of that. As far as how it's tied, the open source philosophy is tied in with my teaching here. I guess I've always been a collaborative person anyway, and there is no bigger collaboration than what's going on with Linux. And when you have so many people who are coming together to try to create something that can be better than any one person can do on their own, that's a pretty amazing thing to see. And it's inspiring to watch, and I try to use that to inspire our kids. And they like the fact that the computers that we're using here at school are ones that are not going to a landfill. They're not going to be, torn apart to their base elements. We're still getting to use these, and that makes sense to them.
It should make sense to everybody.
It should make sense to everybody. I agree. So you guys have been doing some fabulous work, and I know you've mentioned some tools like Aaron's kiosk-like distro that's been very helpful. So a big question to you two is, are there any apps or services or changes that would make your lives easier that the community could pitch in to help out with?
Yeah, an education distro. I know we've been talking a bit about that, but yeah, because every time there's a major update, I tend to have to rewrite the distro that we're using and then repackage it in our server so that we can deploy it. But if there was even a skeleton version of it that already had current stable version of Chrome with updating, ephemeral code was already pre-built, little things like that can save a lot of time. And we still have our own students building their own student flavors of different distros too. So what would we need?
Well, I do hear whispers that Ubuntu might be revived.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, so I think that we're kind of keeping our ears to the ground and watching that progress, and then hopefully that we can have a future Indaba about that. But yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think other educators have kind of recognized that. What about you, Stu?
Now, one thing that would be a big help to us, we're kind of locked into using just stock Ubuntu here at our school, because in addition to using Linux in class or with the small handful of computers that we're sending home now to kids, we also want to use these, at least some of them, for standardized testing, which we're required to do. And I imagine they have similar things in Canada.
Yeah.
There are two specific tests that we have to conduct at our school. We have the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment, or MCA, and the vendor for that is Pearson. They only support two distros. They support Ubuntu and they support Fedora. The other test that we do at our school is called the Access Test, and that's for English language learners. Their app is made by DRC, and they only make their app for Ubuntu. So if I'm going to continue to make the argument that Linux can be used for absolutely everything that we do in this room, then my choices are somewhat limited as far as which distro I can use. Luckily, Ubuntu's worked out so well for me over the years. That's not the issue. The issue is that one of those vendors, and I have no problem saying their name right into this microphone, it's Pearson, is so lagging in trying to make sure that their app works on the latest versions of Ubuntu. Now, I'm not asking them to try to make it work on every single release, but if it would work on whatever the latest LTS release is, then I can make sure that my students have the most up-to-date OS in front of them, along, which is, likely to work better with the apps that I plan to use. And right now, my lab has 2204. By April, I have to convert it over to 2004 just so we can have that test happen in here. And it's a growing pain. Now, can we, are we going to streamline it by doing cloning? Yes, we will. Okay. So it's not going to take a tremendous amount of time, but it shouldn't even be necessary. Everything else that we're doing will work on our selected distro. Chrome, Firefox, Brave for that small handful of kids that installed that when I wasn't looking. Audacity, LibreOffice, OBS, OpenShot. Oh goodness, what else are we going to be doing? Those are probably the main ones. Using Tinkercad through Chrome. All of these things, all of this will work just fine, even for that small handful of kids that have to take the access test. We don't have a lot of them. It's like maybe 60, 70 kids, something like that. We're covered there. It's because of that one test that I can't do what I want to have happen in this room, at least not as much.
So you just mentioned using 2004 and 2204. Are there any other versions of Ubuntu that you currently use, or any flavors that you currently use?
I have a cart next door that because we had a large bunch of sorry, there it is. We had a large bunch of Chromebooks donated to us when COVID started, and a lot of those we still have, but they were no longer supported by Google. So we have Gallium OS running on those. We've used Ubuntu in the past, and that's what we started with before we started dealing with larger numbers, and then the issue of testing became a bit more of a deal. And then we do this in the Penguin Corps. We'll do this one lesson maybe once a season called distro hopping, where we'll have the kids set up computers with multiple distros so they can try a bunch of them out. In fact, one kid fell in love with Ubuntu Unity so much that he grabbed one laptop that we weren't planning to send anywhere because we were just sort of trying to figure out what to do with it because it didn't match any of the other ones. He was like, "Oh, can we put Unity on this?" And it's like, knock yourself out, go for it. So that kind of became his project. Yeah.
That's awesome that you give them the chance to try the different flavors and experiment and see what they like. That's awesome.
We do the same thing with our tech stewards too, where we teach them in the first term, and in the second term, we give them the freedom to choose different distros and build their own student distro, the one that they wish they had. And then they package it in a server that they make, and they deploy it themselves. And some of the kids have made them for family and friends, and they just share it out. The whole point is that they don't try and sell anything, that they're just trying to help improve quality of life for someone else.
Oh, that's fabulous. Now, Andrew, your student tech team, is that a class that kids take, or is that a club, or how does that work at your school?
A few years back, we started to try and weave in an elective program into our program. So the elective program runs one period every 5-day cycle, so once a week, and they get 1 hour.
Okay.
We use that 1 hour time to teach tech stewards from grade 6, 7, and 8. Anyone who's interested, they can join that program, and then they see me once a week. And then what we'll do is, after they've been trained, we fan out throughout the school. Specific students, they're responsible for using a Google Sheet and tracking where everybody goes, telling them where they go, what they have to do, and then they know where I am because they ping me through the G Sheet too, as far as what room I'm in. And I track and trace throughout the whole school, and they take care of the repairs. And then in term 2, we give kids another option when they're trying to join a new elective. Some of the same students will come back to lead, and new students will come in to learn. So we give them that option to join. Other kids will do drone programming, or some will do Destination Imagination or Lego robotics. We've got a whole bunch of different options, and tech stewards that's one of them.
Oh, that's really cool.
That is cool. also, I'd like to point out that it's funny that you mentioned Ubuntu Unity, because that is also maintained by a young person as well. I think Rudra is 13.
Mhm.
So that's pretty cool. Yeah, we actually had him at the Ubuntu Summit to come and talk about his new flavor. It was very nice.
Yeah, when that was announced back in September, I discovered that he was on Twitter. So we've actually communicated with each other a little bit, and I passed on some questions from my students and whatnot. And we were so impressed with him, we made a poster with his picture of on it and put it on the wall over here. So
That's awesome.
That is so endearing. That's wonderful. Now I have a really fun question. I'm very excited to ask this. What is one of the coolest things that your kids have done with Linux, with this new knowledge that you've bestowed upon them? Stu, I'd like to start with you.
coolest thing that they've done using open source tools. Um, I there's so many different things. One thing that kind of sticks out of my mind is last year we decided to try doing something new. My administrators were able to get a grant. They said, if we could get you some grant money, can you think of something to do with it? And I'm like, yeah, we can come up with something. So we did a year-long experiment doing what we called it a case study. In fact, my daughter's trying to help me finish the report so we can actually publish it. But we one-to-one programs are pretty common across North America. And what we were trying to argue was, is it possible to successfully conduct a one-to-one program using our model, which was Linux, used computers, and student text. So the kids and I created this program for the experiment, and they helped sit down and write the rules for it, and as far as how it was going to work. And they came in during the summertime to actually do the installation on the laptops that they were going to be using for it. And then we piloted it out, and those kids, uh, unlike the other kids in the middle school, the other kids in the middle school had to use Chromebooks that were on carts. When the teacher would check out the cart, these kids would just take a laptop with them throughout the course of the day, but they had to report back on like through surveys, uh, like once every 2 weeks, just to see how it was going, and then we compiled the data at the end. And then as an offshoot off of that, we took another set of laptops, assembled it for a checkout cart to give teachers the alternative of, if all the Chromebook carts are tied up, you can check out this laptop cart that's got Ubuntu in it and use that with your students. And then you as a teacher have to take a survey to tell us what your experience was. So I'm going to put that at the top of the heap. I thought that was a really great collaborative project. We had a lot of kids involved with that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, Andrew, do you have any cool projects you want to showcase?
All of our projects, they're successful only because they have, a Linux foundation. So we use a whole bunch of free open source software, and all the tools that we're using allow the kids to be as creative as possible. So one example might be in grade 6 science, for example, we study space. And while we're studying space, we're trying to identify different ways that humans survive in space. So the kids are able to use Tinkercad with our Linux platform to try and design their own circuit designs to possibly clean the air, give access to fresh water.
That's so cool.
Or turn on motors to turn on drills for space mining if they're looking for essential minerals or for frozen water or for ice. And they're going to try and, find ways to measure radiation. So they can use an Arduino control unit in Tinkercad or a microbit. And they do all of this work only because they have access to a Linux computer. Otherwise, we'd be stuck doing paper and pencil, learning from a book that's 10 years old. So
yeah, exactly.
As far as the creative application, the sky's the limit. We just look for the free tools to use it.
So powerful. So wonderful.
There's one additional one. It's not quite as ambitious as either of those. It's just more recent. That was just kind of fun. My 7th grade tech class, this year we made the transition from tech being elective classes to just being a specialist class that every kid has to take. So we got 6th grade tech, 7th grade tech, 8th grade tech. And with my 7th grade class, I came up with an idea of, wouldn't it be cool if we could do some sort of, like graphic arts design kind of thing that benefits the school? And our school has this motto that's supposed to inspire behavior, called THINK. And it's an acronym for tenacity, high expectations, integrity, no excuses, and kindness. And I said, hey guys, let's do an ad campaign for THINK. So your job will be to create posters, and you have to use open source software to do it, but we're going to create posters that are all about THINK, and you'll take the photos for it. You'll do the design. Once you have your work saved, you submit it to me through Google Classroom so I can get it to the printer, and then we'll put them up all over the building. And we finally got that done. It took a little longer than I thought. And I was a little scared because I was like, all right, we're going to, it's like, we're going to have these kids using GIMP. And then we're getting closer, and it's like, okay, I'm still trying to learn how to use GIMP. And so it's like, I'm having trouble figuring some of this stuff out. And maybe now's not the right time to jump into something that I can't really help them with. So we ended up sort of scaling it back. And it's like, okay, we're going to use LibreOffice Draw because that's already on all of these laptops in the lab. And there's all sorts of great fun things we can do with that. And they had a ball, and they turned out some really cool stuff. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
I'm
great.
modest, but it was fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as part of the community team, I have to ask you guys this important question. So not including me, how have people in the open source community helped you guys in some way? How have they reached out to you? How have they aided in your ability to really utilize Linux in education? I'll start with Stu first.
You? Come on.
I mean, you can, but nah. I'll start with Stu.
All right. Open source community helped me with my education efforts. A lot of people have supported us with, behind the scenes, technical support things. I've had people reach out to us so that they could actually meet the kids and come and, teach them about what the open source world is like, or about what their projects are like. Jim Hall, he's a local guy here, but he was the creator of FreeDOS. He came to the school one time to do a little teaching during one of our club meetings. We've also gotten to meet with over Zoom with Gardner Bryant and Brian Lenduke. So those are some people have lended us some support. But one that's really coming to mind is LPI, the Linux Professional Institute. I guess it's kind of in the embryonic stages, but they've really been taken with this model of Linux clubs that we worked on here. So they're trying to scale it up and roll it out under their umbrella to be able to help community centers and schools elsewhere start Linux clubs of their own. So that's pretty cool. So they've been pretty supportive in what we've done here. And then, the local community, we've gotten to take part in events from the local Drupal community. We've gotten to go and speak at Open Source North, which is a regional conference here. They invited us in to do stuff like that. So those are a few things that come to mind.
Those are some great things. That's fantastic to hear about LPI wanting to maybe kind of standardize this so other schools can take advantage of this program. How about you, Andrew?
Exactly.
In Canada, we don't have as many Linux contacts available. I think that's probably why I was so happy to reach out and speak to you through Twitter, just because I felt like we were on a bit of an island here. We have a few like-minded teachers, but that was it as far as helping each other. And then after I reached out, we connected, I also was able to connect with Sean. He's one of the lead developers for Ubuntu, and he's very receptive about communicating and giving help and listening when he's designing any upgrades to his system, which is awesome because I had the same type of rapport with Google developers too. And Google still reaches out and asks for feedback all the time. So I love that open two-way communication as far as we're the end user and you're the developers and you're very willing to listen and help us with the platform development. Don Watkins has been a great help, and Phil Shapiro.
Oh, Don.
They both spread the message wide and far about the hard work that we're doing, and it helps bring in more support. So as far as community building, it's fantastic. I can't imagine, I can't believe how many people are involved in helping do such amazing things. And the impact it's having is massive. Our kids are benefiting every day because of it.
Andrew, quick question. Have you found that you've been able to get more support from the open source community than you could from the education community? Because that's been my experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of bureaucracy that's in the way as far as having access to tech first. If we can get the hardware, we can help more students, but we just can't get the hardware.
Yeah.
All corporations have their own recycling platforms already put in place. They've got agreements in place, and we can't bypass that. So as far as open source support, it's always there.
Oh, absolutely.
I think this is great. And I think we need more teachers like you that are so excited to embrace this open source and help the students with it. So if there are other teachers out there that are going to watch this and say, hey, I want to start something like that in my school, do you have any tips or tricks or advice for how Aaron use Aaron's distro? Yeah, maybe we'll have to drop some links into the discourse post, linking to that. But I wondered if you've gone, both of you have gone, well, all three of you have gone through this journey. Have you written blog posts about like, here's how to get started?
Or absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
The first bit of advice that I try to give teachers when they express interest in it is start small, try it yourself, get a feel for not just what Linux is, at least on the desktop, but what you can do with it. And the more you get into using it yourself, I've found the more people tend to like it. And then from there, if you're talking about, in the atmosphere of a club, which is what my experience has been in, is start small, grow big. And don't expect everything to happen overnight, but continually challenge yourself to try new things. And if you're curious about some more concrete examples of how to do what we're doing here, is I would suggest to people, there's my Linux Club guide, which I was asked to write up and put out on the internet, because when we started this, there was no template to follow. And somebody at All Things Open asked, hey, have you ever written any of this down? As no, I didn't know I'd need to. And so I've assembled that now. It's gone through a few different revisions, and it's about to be translated into other languages for the first time, which I'm really excited about because that never even occurred to me. So that's something that teachers may want to check out if they're looking for ideas as far as how to get started.
Very good. Yeah. And I also included a link that Andrew provided. So you can take a look at this, reuse before you recycle link. So that's fabulous. And also Ken had a really good question. Would integrated parental controls in Ubuntu be useful for you guys in your environments?
Well, Aaron's kind of helped with that a little bit as far as a parental control, where if a student forgets to sign out, we can simply just close Chrome and it automatically removes their account credentials, thereby providing a parent block so that if a student forgot, another kid can't use their account and fraudulently and impersonate them. But as far as other parental controls, honestly, like Stu said, if a student gets into root access and starts fooling around with the computer and locks it out or crashes it to the point where it won't boot, we just re-image it. And with the fog server, it only takes 45 seconds.
That's great. And also it kind of, gets them hacking on their computer, right? That's kind of fun too.
That web link, it does have a summary of a whole bunch of the outreach that we've been doing as far as blog writing. Aaron helped a ton with that, and a lot of it's his work. What he was doing while he was sharing the work, I was posting notes about what I was going through and to try and help myself process it. And there's some YouTube videos up there too about how to build fog servers or how to follow Aaron's instructions and build a student Corvos. And there's some radio chats we've done, some interviews, we had other journalists interview some of us, and we've participated in a bunch of different conferences as well. So it's a history of a lot of the work we've done. There should be a photo journal in there too, a photo archive. It's almost like a story of pictures of what we've done since 2016.
That's great.
That is really cool.
Cataloging the history there. That's beautiful.
So I'd asked about how the open source community has helped you guys thus far. What are some things that the overall community can do to help you guys and educators in general going forward, do you think?
Well, one thing that they can do is send us their old computers when they get new ones. We're always going to need that. So that's always appreciated, when an individual or a business does that. But another thing that I would like to see people in the open source community do is try to get involved with their local school, whether they have kids or not. Everybody lives in a district somewhere. So, talk, email people on the school board and say, hey, we really think that Linux and open source should be used in some capacity at the school. Volunteer to help. You'll have to go through a background check. Don't let it scare you. You had to get one when you got hired. Not a big deal. So I would like to see more people get involved.
Absolutely. I think another way that might help too would be to continue to lobby with governments about right to repair. That'll assist us with our work, because if it becomes policy governmentally speaking, then they're going to enforce it in school boards where it has to be implemented, not just a hobby.
That's a cool idea.
Because our board right now, we don't really have regulations as far as how much we're supposed to reuse. We have policies for recycling, which technically are very wasteful because they're recycling useful computers all the time. Every school board does right now.
It's too bad.
What else can we do? Oh, there's one other thing too. I did make a note of it. When we use our Linux computers, we tend to have projection tools like an Apple TV, for example. And we don't have a way of direct links from an Ubuntu or any type of Linux computer to share with an Apple TV that's functional yet. I've tried a bunch of the current systems that are available and nothing's reliable yet. So what we do is we'll take we have one access to one Mac computer, for example. We'll connect that one through the Apple TV, and then through Google Classroom, we'll open up a Google Meet, and the kids can they share through Google Meet through the teacher's computer instead. It's a way to bypass, but it would be much more convenient if we could connect a Linux computer to an Apple TV. Not necessary, but
that would be nice. Yeah. And now at our school, all of our classrooms are using smart boards. And the old style of smart board with like the overhead projector that would aim at the board, like those old dinosaur ones, they were kind of hit and miss with Linux because Smart was really just awful with updating their drivers for Linux and trying to keep them current. And they were always behind with that. And with the newer like LCD display, the flat panel boards, it's somewhat unnecessary because so many of the drivers that would make touch work and the sound and the video and all of that just work out of the box is built into the Linux kernel. So the things that we would need to do, 10 years ago, we don't really need to do now. You just plug it in. So that's kind of cool.
Very cool. I also want to just brief aside. I believe you have a student here, Stu.
He must be down the hall watching this. That's kind of cool. I hope I do hope he's paying attention to Carline so he doesn't miss his ride home. But hello, Jake. Good to see you. Okay.
And since we're about out of time, I wanted to ask, I grabbed some links that you had mentioned, and we'll definitely post those in the discourse. So new, teachers, anybody that's interested can check them out. But before we go, are there any like final, comments or things that you want to shout out to?
Well, I guess I'm thrilled that I'm actually getting to hang out with Andrew and Aaron today. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time. This is fabulous. But I only know of a handful of teachers who have actively integrated Linux into their work. And a fair chunk of us are on this call right now. I mean, it's like Charlie Reisinger is not with us right now. In Pennsylvania, there was, another guy in the Oakland district some years back that did some great things, Robert Litt. But there aren't that many of us. I would really love to see more of us in education doing what we're doing, and to give our students from different schools a chance to connect to each other.
That's true. And also, as a mom, I really appreciate the energy that you guys bring to this. And my daughter is 4, so she's not in school yet, but she's being raised on open source, and I can't wait to do like a robotics class. As we get older and older. And she'll pick up a Raspberry Pi and say, "Can I have this when I'm older?" And we're like, "Oh, we can play with it now." Right? With gcompree, which is like the KDE app for kind of, toddler
We just put that app on all the laptops in my lab Monday morning. Yeah. So K3 has been getting gcompree this week.
That's solid. That's so lovely. Yeah. So I'm also very excited from the other side of it. I'm so glad that we have educators like you among us.
And Stu, like you said, there might be other teachers out there that are currently using Linux in the classroom. They just don't know that more of us exist. So if you are an educator or work in a school and do use it, please reach out to us. Then maybe we can bring you on the next Indaba stream.
Yeah, absolutely.
It needs to be done. So you were mentioning that discourse is part of this chat and this presentation. What about creating some form of a discourse Twitter hybrid system that does bring in all of the developers with all of the educators who are currently using systems like this? We do have quite a few in Canada, but they're sparse. Everyone's spread out. Having an Ubuntu hub that would give us a place or a home to communicate, that would be amazing.
We might need a new category in our discourse. That's a great idea. Ken did follow up real quick. I wanted to bring this up just because he mentioned about integrating those parent controls. He was leaning more towards using it in like the software center, since they're working on a new software center, having those parental controls baked in, and then how those could be used to actually limit applications on the desktop itself at like the OS level.
That would be slick.
Yeah, it would be cool. Yeah.
I know there's also a rating system that's coming too, so that'll be exciting. Well, thank you both very much for your energy, the work that you do, your time. Thanks, Aaron, for helping them out, and thank you everybody that watched and asked questions and participated. I really appreciate everyone's time, and thank you. It was lovely. And we'll have our next Indaba the last Friday of February, which I believe is February 24th. We don't quite have a topic yet, but I'm I've got some ideas, so stay tuned for his prize.
All right.
So we'll say goodbye to everyone for now. Thanks again, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.